All right, welcome to today's video. And for today's topic, we're going to be discussing the top 8 parts that I'm concerned about for the longevity of the Dodge Vipers. So specifically the Gen 2 Vipers, the 96 to 2002 Vipers, and the parts that I'm most concerned about for being able to maintain these cars in the long run, considering now they're over 20 years old and parts are becoming harder to find. So to kick off, number 8 is emblems. Now, while this may seem like a silly part to be concerned about, I recently went through this a couple of years ago when I had to get mine repainted after going through a sandstorm. And when they had to do the entire repaint of the entire car, that meant I had to get all new emblems. And the emblems, trying to find them in the GTS Blue, proved to be a bit of a challenge. So as a result, the body shop had to get them in different colors that they could find and then repaint those GTS Blue, which from an appearance standpoint, it means they match the paint a lot better than some 24 plus year old part, but at the same time, they're not factory blue emblems. So if you have the car and you're concerned that in the long term you may need to replace the emblems, you might want to start looking to see if you can get a set in the color of your car already, so you can just have them keep them as a peace of mind. So number 7 on the list are the window stanchions for the doors. And the problem is the weather strip on the doors tends to split. And unfortunately, you can't buy just the weather strip. You have to buy the entire stanchion. Now, from my understanding, reading online the forums and stuff, it looks like there is a company that's working on trying to come out with replacement parts that are more cost effective. And for the most part, having those starting to crack is more of a nuisance than anything. But if they do break, they can become a problem and do end up needing to be replaced. And replacing the entire stanchion can be quite expensive. So number 6 on the list is really only applying to the early Gen 2 cars and the Gen 1 cars, and that's the dash pad itself. So the main dash on the early Gen cars, it's a rubberized finish on them that can be damaged rather easily and is not easy to repair. And that part's just not really available anymore. So trying to find one of those can be a challenge. And I know in my case, one of the concerns I have with mine is dealing with the AC system. And the problem I think I'm having with it is behind the dash, and I'm reluctant to pull the dash for risk of damaging it. And the newer ones, it's not as big of a deal because they replaced that rubberized finish on the dash with a grain finish. And so you don't have to worry about damaging it as much because it's not as easy to damage. So from there, number 5 on the list are the actual headlight assemblies. Again, when I had to get my car repainted, the car had gone through a sandstorm. If you'd watched my video on the Vegas Curse, which I'll put a link in the description below for that, the car went through the sandstorm and it just sandblasted the entire car. And as a result, it pitted the headlights really, really bad. And so we tried to find brand new headlights, and we searched the country and we couldn't find a set of brand new headlights anywhere. And we contacted even wrecking yards that specialize in Vipers and exotic cars, and no one had a really pristine set of headlights. So the body shop ended up having to do a restoration on these headlights, which they came out amazing. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. But for people out there that get in accidents or have rocks fly or something else that breaks the lenses on them, finding replacements is going to be a big challenge, especially as we progress in time and more parts become more and more scarce. So from there, number 4 on the list is the windshield. Now, this may not be as big of a deal now as it was just a couple of months ago, but trying to find a windshield for these early Vipers is becoming more and more difficult. Although I believe in the last month or so I was seeing online that there is an alternative manufacturer that's starting to produce these early Vipers windshields. So if that's the case, that's great news, and will definitely help prolong the availability of these cars and keep them up and running. Because that was, again, another thing. When this car went through the sandstorm, it cracked the windshield, and the body shop spent 3 months finding a windshield. They were finally able to find one at a Dodge dealership back on the East Coast somewhere and had them send it out. And so hopefully what I was seeing online earlier in this last month or so is correct, that the windshields are now becoming more available, because that's definitely going to help, because that's a huge part that if you start breaking windshields, I'd hate to see these cars end up being totaled because you can't get a replacement windshield for them. So from there, number 3 on the list is the fuel pump. So if you're an owner of these early cars, and you've put a decent number of miles on them and started having fuel pump problems, you know what I'm talking about. And you'll go and you'll try to start the car and nothing will happen. It'll just turn over and turn over and turn over. Well, what's happening is in the fuel pump, there's a check valve. And that check valve over time goes bad, and when your car sits after driving it, it can bleed off the fuel pressure in the line. And so what you have to do is then crank the car over and reprime the fuel system. Unfortunately, the fuel pump turns off after a few seconds of cranking, and so you'll have to crank it a few seconds, let it go, crank it again, and do it like 3 or 4 times to reprime the fuel system, and then you can start the car. Now, fuel pumps on these cars for an OEM one tend to be around $1,500, maybe $2,000, and so it's not a cheap part. I believe there's a couple of companies out there that are working on replacement units, and hopefully they come out with one that's a little more cost effective, but it's definitely something that can cause heartache and be a big expense on repairing these cars in the long run. So from there, number 2 on my list is the ECU itself. And these cars, OEM ECUs, I keep seeing people online running into problems with their ECUs and it stops working and not being able to find a replacement. And finding replacements can be really expensive, even for a used one. And so for long term, there's also more concern there with if the ECU comes out, you've basically got a nice piece of garage art because you're not going anywhere without a functioning ECU. Now, there are companies out there that can repair ECUs. I'm not sure if any of them out there have actually started repairing the Viper ECUs yet. So if anybody out there knows, go ahead and comment in the comment section below, because I'd love to hear about companies that you are aware of that are in fact repairing these ECUs, because I know I have some friends that would be interested to know that as well. And of course, that brings us to the number 1 concern that I have for these cars, and that's tires. And the reason that is these early Gen 2 cars and the Gen 1 cars are running a 17-inch wheel, and the tires are basically only available for this specific car. And there are only a couple options out there, and really your primary option is to run a Michelin Pilot Sport 2. And Michelin, if you've watched my other videos on these cars, on the reliability, you'll know that the Michelin tires are only run very infrequently, and when they do low volume batches. And so you really have to be careful on how old the tires are when you buy new tires, because you may be buying a brand new set of tires, but they could have been from a batch or 2 before, and they could be starting to age out already. And so tires are definitely a huge concern. And that's hands down my number 1 concern for the longevity of these cars, is being able to purchase tires for these stock wheels. Now, of course, the options are to go ahead and replace the stock wheels with a bigger wheel that is an 18 and 19 combo, like on the Gen 3s, 4s, and 5s. And that is definitely a viable option. Is probably what I'll end up doing if the 17 tires stop becoming available, is put a set of wheels on there that are the same dimensions as the newer Vipers, because those tires, considering there are a lot more Vipers produced from 2003 to 2017 than just the brief period that they had the 17-inch on the early cars. And you also have other brand choices like Pirelli besides just Michelin when you're looking for tires. So those are my top 8 parts that I'm concerned about for the Vipers for the longevity and availability. If you have any other parts that you're concerned about, go ahead and put those in the comment section below, because I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on which parts you're concerned about for the long-term survivability of these cars. So if you like today's video, go ahead and smash that like button, give us a thumbs up down below. And if you don't want to miss any of my other videos, go ahead and smash that subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell, so that way YouTube notifies you of all of the videos that I upload. And as always, I will see you at the next video.